All right, y'all, you're Locked On Falcons. I'm your host, Aaron Freeman, and today is Crossover Thursday, where I'll be joined by the host of Locked On Saints, Ross Jackson, to give you all the key matchups, key stories, and all of that and more in this week one Falcons matchup between the Saints.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, it is week one of the NFL season, and that means crossover Thursdays are back. So here on the Locked On Falcons and Locked On Saints podcast, we're getting you ready for the New Orleans Saints traveling to the great city of Atlanta to take on the Atlanta Falcons. In order to help us do that, it is myself, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola, your daily host of Locked On Saints, and of course, Aaron Freeman at FalcFans on Twitter, daily host of Locked On Falcons. We thank you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day here on your respective favorite shows, covering your respective favorite teams every single Monday through Friday as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this Locked On crossover is presented by our friends over at Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy made the way that it should be. If you ask me, you pick 2 to 5 players and you simply have to pick whether or not they're going to score more or less than their Prize Picks projection. And if you do that, you can win up to 10 times your entry fee. And on top of all that, new users can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 by using the promo code Locked On. That's promo code Locked On for a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 at prizepicks.com. Aaron Freeman, Locked On Falcons. It is week one. I'm so excited for the season, and I'm so excited to speak with you on this crossover Thursday.
Well, Ross, I'm glad I get to do Crossover Thursday, the first one of the 2022 regular season with you. My brother from another mother, and, it's representative of, these two cities that are so integrated and interconnected and bitter rivals. Just like brothers and siblings, we fight and we squabble. But at the end of the day, at least on today's crossover, there's going to be a lot of love here.
Yes, there is a lot of love here, and that's what happens when you get a melanated crossover like this. We bring a lot of love, so I'm very, very excited about what we've got here with Aaron Freeman. And Aaron, let's start off with those Atlanta Falcons as they're hosting this game with the New Orleans Saints coming to town. What's the biggest story going on in Atlanta ahead of week one?
Yeah, it's all about Drake London, and he got injured in the first preseason game, played I think 4 or 5 snaps in that game, made a big catch in that game, and then got hit low in the knee, was out for the rest of the game, out for the rest of the preseason, is back at practice on a limited basis as of Wednesday. The expectation is that he'll probably be limited for the rest of the week. And Falcons head coach Arthur Smith already indicated that they'll make sort of a decision on Saturday, not necessarily a game time decision, but they'll sort of monitor his progress over the course of the week. All things seem to be pointing in the favor of him playing. All indications, all statements by the team have said that his progress is good. He's been on track since that initial injury to be able to play week one, but we're just sort of in wait and see mode by the end of the day, end of the week, Friday and then Saturday, to see sort of what his official designation. But certainly their number 1 draft pick is going to be a big part of their game plan, and they're going to need him if they hope to match some of the firepower that we're going to see on the Saints side of the ball on offense.
Yeah, it's a bit of a different receiving core in New Orleans than it was the last time these two teams met. But quick question for you about Drake London. Is he seen as kind of the X receiver there, the number 1 guy? I mean, obviously Kyle Pitts is a top option, but at the wide receiver position, I mean.
Yes, absolutely. Drake London is going to be the number 1 wide receiver, although Kyle Pitts is the number 1 receiver, and he's going to be moved all around the formation. But certainly on the outside, Drake London's going to be that guy. But the Falcons do have Bryan Edwards, who is familiar with Saints fans from a pretty promising game he had a couple of years ago when he was with the Raiders.
Oh, yeah.
And he's also very familiar with Marcus Mariota from their shared days with the Raiders. So if London is limited in incapacity or if he's out for this game, I think the Falcons feel pretty comfortable with Bryan Edwards sort of filling in those shoes. But certainly you would feel a lot better if you're a Falcon fan with Drake London out there making his NFL debut.
Yeah, for sure. Look, Bryan Edwards, not a bad receiver to quote unquote fall back on. 2 catches for 42 yards, including a 20-yarder and a 22-yarder the last time that he met the New Orleans Saints defense. So certainly he remembers that, carries that confidence in. It is a big story in Atlanta to see all that going on with Drake London and to see whether or not he's going to be out there, although signs are trending toward that. But it's important for Saints fans to keep an eye out on that for sure, because right now the New Orleans Saints are dealing with Paulson Adebo not currently in practice, at least on Wednesday. We'll see how the rest of the week's practice reports trend out, but that could mean Bradley Roby kicks outside, Marshawn Lattimore ends up with a little bit more responsibility, having maybe travel with some big receivers, things like that. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. For the New Orleans Saints, when it comes to the biggest story, it's a wide receiver as well. And it's big number 13, Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas has not played a football game since the playoffs of 2020. He returned to camp and was out there right away, although he was in a ramp-up period as everyone expected. And now, he's been dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury after coming back from the right ankle injury that led to 2 different surgeries that he had to recover from. And so he's been sidelined for the last little bit, but on Wednesday, he was out there at practice. He was limited on Wednesday, but still, if he gets one full participation practice, I imagine it's going to be very hard to keep Michael Thomas off the field, considering how long it's been since that poor guy's been able to get out there and do what it is that he loves and be able to get out there with Jameis Winston, who he's built a nice rapport with over the course of the offseason. So the two kind of big pieces to it are the is Michael Thomas going to be able to be out there week 1, but then also how, much is he able to be utilized? What kind of receiver is he? Like, at what level of Michael Thomas is he in that conversation?
Absolutely. And it's going to be an interesting matchup because the Falcons are dealing with the injury at corner. Isaiah Oliver, their nickel corner, heading into the season, is on IR, at least for the first month of the season, as he's coming off of an ACL injury from a year ago. And that's going to put D. Alford, presumably their CFL pickup, in that nickel spot alongside A.J. Terrell and Casey Hayward on the outside. And so we know Michael Thomas likes to spend a lot of time in the slot. We know Jarvis Landry, that's where he's thrived. I'm sure the Saints would love to wrinkle it up and throw Chris Olave in the slot at times. So whoever that nickel cornerback is, presumably D. Alford, will have his hands full regardless of whether Michael Thomas suits up on Sunday.
Yeah, and Atlanta Falcons' bitter, hated rival Taysom Hill will probably get some run in the slot as well, as he becomes a superhero every time he plays the Atlanta Falcons, it seems. But I mean, you mentioned Jarvis Landry, Michael Thomas, Chris Olave. That's one of the biggest things and changes for this New Orleans Saints team. So coming up next, let's break down a little bit of the matchups, right? The key matchups between these two teams that could end up deciding this game on Sunday. Before we get to that, the Saints effectively had some rentals out there at wide receiver last year with guys like, Chris Hogan and Kenny Stills, and that didn't work out. So the New Orleans Saints now have revamped that wide receiver room. That's one of the things that I love about our friends over at Turo, who have absolutely revamped the way that you get the vehicle that you're looking for when you're on the road. It doesn't matter where you are, right? If you're here in the US, in the UK, or even in Canada, you need to be checking out Turo because it is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. And you don't have to deal with any of the other stuff, the usual stuff that you have to deal with some of those other places. They have a huge selection. You're not just being thrown into a midsize because that's what they have. You want a luxury car, you can get a luxury car. You want a SUV or a minivan for the family vacation, you can get an SUV or a minivan. You want something that's classic for a special occasion, you got it. You just need an affordable economy car, they got you as well to help you get from A to B. Test drive that new electric vehicle that you might also be looking at as well. You can do all that via Turo. Many Turo hosts will actually deliver the car directly to you as well, so you don't have to stand in line and do all of that stuff. Every trip is also backed by liability insurance. Terms and conditions and exclusions, of course, apply. Ditch those boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. All right, everybody, continuing on with this crossover Thursday here, Locked On Saints, Locked On Falcons. It is immediately jumping into the big rivalry here in the NFC South week 1. I mean, we immediately get to dive into this, but of course, Aaron, you and I tend to be pretty friendly around this rivalry.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how friendly the players are going to be on the field Sunday. And it gets us to the key matchup because it's been decidedly unfriendly in the Falcons' favor when it comes to the battle in the trenches. That's always sort of the thing that decides the fate of this football matchup. It's not Drew Brees. It's not really Sean Payton. It's, can the Falcons get pressure on the quarterback, and can they prevent the Saints from getting pressure on them? I looked up the stats. If you go back to the last 17 times the Saints and Falcons have played, the Saints have sacked the Falcons quarterback 56 times and hit him 125 times. And if you look at the worst offensive lines in football last year, the Falcons gave up the most quarterback hits last year with 130, and the Bears were the worst in terms of sacks allowed with 58. So essentially, over the course of a season's worth of games against the Saints going back, the better part of a decade, the Falcons look like the worst offensive line in football. And so that needs to change. And it'll be very interesting to see if that does change, given the Falcons have some changes to their offensive line. They have a new starter at left guard, a new starter at center. Elijah Wilkinson is sort of a journeyman offensive tackle, swing tackle type of player. Came in and unseated Jalen Mayfield, their incumbent left guard in training camp competition. Drew Dahlman, last year's 4th-round pick, unseated the previous year's 3rd-round pick in Matt Hennessy at the center position. But of course, good old Caleb McGarry still standing strong at right tackle. Cam Jordan's very familiar with him. And to Caleb McGarry's credit, he's had some good outings against Cam Jordan, but he's had some very bad ones. And Sunday, we're going to need to see one of the good ones if the Falcons are going to have any chance. They should potentially benefit by Marcus Mariota's ability to, get outside the pocket and make some plays. I think that's going to be critical for this offense. We're hoping for a little bit more explosiveness from this offense, and Mariota's ability to sort of create off structure was something that Matt Ryan was not particularly good. It's one of the few things that Mariota does better than Matt Ryan. So if the offensive line can hold up just a little bit and allow Marcus Mariota to move around and use his legs to extend plays, and be able to take shots to those big wide receivers that the Falcons have downfield, that should lead to some explosive plays, and that should lead to some good outpouring of offense for the Falcons on Sunday. And maybe that's enough for them to get the W in week 1.
Yeah, that's a huge stat that you just mentioned about the last 17 games and how often the Saints have been able to get into the backfield on the Atlanta Falcons. That is some of the, that's some of the calling card of what it is New Orleans Saints like to do against these Atlanta Falcons is disrupt the quarterback. It's going to be a little bit tougher. The Saints have struggled against mobile quarterbacks like Marcus Mariota in the very recent past. I mean, look at what Jalen Hurts has done to them over the course of the past couple of years, everything. And obviously those are two very different players, but the zone read is something that the Saints have struggled against. And that Saints defense is very much still the same Saints defense that it was last year, even though you have a little bit kind of changes in personnel, the scheme, the way that they play it, Dennis Allen, like all of those things are still consistent. So Saints are going to have their work cut out for them when it comes to defending that. But the key matchup that I'm going to be watching actually goes for both the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons. And it's both of these teams versus the play clock versus the game clock. To me, this is a game that if one of these two teams wins time of possession by more than half a quarter, that team probably wins the game. I don't think that this is going to be a blowout. I don't think that this is going to be a situation to where you see one team absolutely from the very beginning, carry a multi-score lead in a halftime or anything like that. I think this is going to be a pretty close game and maybe even a lower scoring game than some people might anticipate. Because for the Saints, this game needs to be about their defense and their run game. And that's not anything about Jameis Winston. That's everything to do with the Atlanta Falcons right now. They don't have a Deion Jones. They don't have a Foye Oluokun. Like, they don't have the guys that have caused so much trouble for Alvin Kamara to be able to get going against the Atlanta Falcons. One of the teams that he's probably performed, in terms of in terms of production and output amongst the worst of his career, it has been against the Atlanta Falcons. And so getting him going early on and getting to a point where you're looking at 150 combined rushing yards for this team, that's the type of mark that the Saints are going to be looking for to eclipse when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons, and then controlling the clock by doing that, right? Being productive, picking up first downs, which is where Jarvis Landry really comes into, maybe his, greatest asset is the fact that he can help you move the chains. And sure, they'll take a shot downfield every now and then. You got Chris Olave on this team now. You got Jameis Winston who can get the ball downfield. You'll take those shots when you get them. But for the most part, I expect this team to be conservative, and I expect this team to be one that looks to manage the clock. And it's all going to be about ball control here in the 2022 season opener. It might not be the prettiest football, but if you like the trenches play, like you just mentioned, if you like the Saints' chances in the trenches, that might be what ends up deciding this game to open up 2022.
Yes, conservative and Jameis Winston are not two words that often go in the same sentence. So that's news to, I think, Falcon fans, but I know that's certainly been sort of the story for Jameis now in New Orleans, sort of transforming himself into a more conservative passer. But Jameis is going to get itchy and push the ball down the field at least a couple of times to Chris Olave in this game, and we'll sort of see if the Falcons can hold up in coverage. And that's sort of the last matchup that I'm going to be keyed on, because you mentioned Deion Jones not going to be in this lineup in the previous matchups. He's been kind of the guy tasked to cover Alvin Kamara in the passing game. And you mentioned Kamara in the grounding game. The Falcons really bottled him up in that Week 9 win last year. Did not do so in the Week 18 loss to the Saints last year, where I think Kamara had over 140 yards rushing in that game, and the Saints combined for 195 yards rushing. But I'm also very curious to see how the Falcons match up with Kamara in the passing game, given that they don't have that sort of running back eraser in coverage in Deion Jones that normally would get that assignment. Maybe that's going to be put on Michael Walker, the player who will be replacing Deion Jones in the starting lineup, a player that's been very good in coverage in limited opportunities over the last 2 seasons. And now he's going to be kind of have this expanded role, and this will be a great opportunity for him to get his 2022 season off to a great start if he can sort of keep Alvin Kamara in check. You can't shut down Alvin Kamara, but you just only hope to contain him, as they say. So we'll see if Walker is up to that task.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge set of matchups between these two teams, and not the least of which being just simply how do each of these. I mean, these two quarterbacks don't actually match up with one another, but we're talking about number 1 and number 2 back in 2015. So now you have like the immediate competition between the two. Jameis Winston talking about that on Wednesday after practice, saying, "Hey, look." Even in this game, we're not really competing against each other. It's our offense versus their defense, and their offense versus our defense, and everything. But still, even despite that, like that narrative is going to carry through into this game, especially if you're watching the national broadcast and you're not just watching one of the local broadcasts. They're going to talk about that the entire time. Coming up next, Aaron Freeman and I are going to give our picks for this game. Who will win? Who will not? We'll tell you what we think as we continue on and wrap up this Locked On Saints, Locked On Falcons NFL crossover here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, everybody. We are wrapping up this NFL crossover here, Locked On Falcons. That's Aaron Freeman at FalcFans on Twitter, myself, Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your Locked On Saints podcast host. And before we jump into our predictions, I want to remind you to also go and check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022. Aaron and I were both on our NFC South episode, which dropped yesterday on Wednesday. Today, Thursday, we're going to have you covered with the NFC West. Make sure you get a little bit of that Rams action in before their big game, because, Aaron, we are just 1 day away from football. I mean, not even 1 day away. It's today we have football, which is just absolutely insane to me. But I'm so excited about it.
Absolutely. Rams action. Aaron Donald right behind me.
Hey, there you go. Just watching over you at all times.
Yes, absolutely.
So as we wrap up this Locked On crossover, Locked On Falcons and Locked On Saints, we're going to dive into our score predictions, or our predictions for this game. Aaron, as the hosting team, we'll start off with you here. The Atlanta Falcons are at home as 5.5-point favorites. What do you think of that, and how do you see this game playing out?
Yeah, I think the Falcons, it'll be interesting. I'm trying to say this the right way. The Saints have gotten a lot of love as of late on the NFC South preview, and I've seen a lot of people. I think Tony Wiggins was on Locked On NFL earlier this week talking about the Saints being a Super Bowl team, and I'm just baffled by this. And because of that, like earlier this week, I did my official season preview and prediction for the Falcons, and I had the Saints winning this game 27-20. But now the Saints are getting too much love this week. This basically, and it's rare that I can be optimistic and positive when it comes to the Falcons winning games over these last couple of years, and probably won't get too many opportunities to go all in on the Falcons this season if this season goes the way I think it's going to go. So I am going to take advantage of this opportunity to knock the Saints down a peg, and rather than having the Saints win this game 27-20 and covering, I'm going to have the Falcons upsetting the Saints 27-24 in this week 1 matchup. And all of a sudden, Tony Wiggins is going to be crying in his Cheerios come Monday morning.
Oh, the only thing that's going to be upset about all of that, Aaron, is you by the time this game finishes up. Listen, the New Orleans Saints deserve every bit of the optimism, every bit of the love that they've been getting. This is a team that won 9 games last year with 4 quarterbacks, 58 different starters, never had the kicker that they expected to have. They lost 2 close games that came down 2 field goals, including, of course, Younghoe Koo, and that great, he's a phenomenal kicker, and he closed that game out early on in the season against the Saints. But I'm not gonna stand for it, Aaron. The New Orleans Saints are gonna win this game. I don't think they're gonna cover. I will say that. I think that they win. I think that it's like a 24-20 type of a situation, maybe even a little bit lower scoring than that, like 17-14 kind of. But I think that the Saints win, but not by 5 or more points. I don't think that they win by a touchdown, and I don't care if that's a late touchdown by the Atlanta Falcons or if it's just that competitive. I think it will just be that competitive, and time of possession ends up being the thing that takes this game home for the New Orleans Saints. But they've got Jameis Winston. They've got Michael Thomas. They've got Jarvis Landry, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara. I can list it all. Tyrann Mathieu in the building now. Marcus May is probably going to play week 1. There's so many different pieces to all of this when it comes down to why the New Orleans Saints deserve the love that they're getting. And Aaron, I can't believe you would have the nerve to come on this crossover and do this to me. Everyone was showing so much love, and then you had to come and do this to me. I can't believe it.
It's too much.
I'll never forgive you.
It was too much. I just didn't know. The NFC South preview, I was just like, what is David Harrison, talking about the Saints possibly winning division? I'm like, what are you doing, David?
Right.
And then, of course, Julian's got to take his shots whenever he can take his shots. So I expected that from him. But, and then hear Tony just hyping up the Saints as a Super Bowl contender. I'm like, okay, this ends now. I will make my voice heard on Crossover Thursday, this melanated episode. All right. I will blacken Ross's dreams. On Sunday, I'm picking the Falcons. I don't know how many more chances I'm going to get to pick the Falcons, so I'm going to do it this week.
I've had so much blackened catfish since I've been back in the city of New Orleans, Aaron. You can't hurt me, man. You can't do it. The New Orleans Saints, of course, coming in. Oh, and by the way, the New Orleans Saints were also picked. I just want to let me just also mention by Matt Williamson, former NFL scout, one of the guys that knows more than anybody else across this network in terms of what's going to happen across the NFL as the NFC South champions. So that's a top 4 seed, Aaron. That's a top 4 seed. But it all starts this weekend. All right, to wrap us up, let's review. Biggest stories for both of these teams, starting off with the Atlanta Falcons.
It's going to be Drake London and his status for week 1. Falcons going to need their number 1 draft pick to play on Sunday. He's been limited in practice on Wednesday and probably will remain so for the rest of the week with a knee injury, and his status will be updated on Friday and Saturday with whatever progress he makes in the practice week this week.
Similarly, when it comes to the New Orleans Saints, the biggest story is watching Michael Thomas, the wide receiver as well, also limited on Wednesday. You're looking for him to get maybe 1 full participation practice in this week. If that happens, then I think you should expect to see number 13 in the black and gold or whatever jersey colors they're wearing that day in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. The key matchups that you're watching, Aaron, from the Atlanta Falcons perspective.
It's about this new revamped, I guess you could say, with two new starters along the Falcons offensive line in the battle in the trenches, slowing down that Saints pass rush with David Onyemata and Cam Jordan and Marcus Davenport. All these guys are household names in the minds of Falcon fans because they've been so dominant over the last several years with getting pressure on the quarterback. And the Falcons offensive line is going to need to be able to hold up so that Marcus Mariota, their new starting quarterback, can extend plays outside the pocket and maybe generate some of those explosive plays that will allow the Falcons to score enough points to win this game.
And for the New Orleans Saints, it comes down to the clock for both of these teams. Can the New Orleans Saints win time of possession by more than half a quarter? If they can, they win this game. If they lose that, I think that that's the case. So they could potentially lose this game as well. You're also going to be watching the health of Paulson Adebo. That kind of goes hand in hand with what Aaron was just speaking about when it comes to Drake London as the biggest story to follow in Atlanta, because you're going to need 2 good cornerbacks out there, your 2 best cornerbacks out there, if you're going to have Bryan Edwards on one side and Drake London on the other with Kyle Pitts in the mix. Although the Saints won't be for want of any talent with a veteran like Bradley Roby that could swing to the outside as well. And finally, the score predictions. Aaron, reluctantly, I asked you, remind us of your score prediction for this game.
I got the Falcons upsetting the Saints week 1, 27-24, and ruining the dreams of Tony Wiggins and Matt Williamson, Ross Jackson, and all the Locked On Saints fans that are very gassed up for this upcoming 2022 season.
And I think that New Orleans Saints fans will be more gassed up than ever after they open up the 2022 season with a victory in Atlanta up against the bitter rival Atlanta Falcons. I'm calling it 24-20 in favor of the New Orleans Saints, dominating ground game and a early at least kind of impact from the defense all throughout. But they are going to have to show up mostly toward the end of the game to hold off that lead. And I think they're going to be able to do that. Aaron, absolute pleasure. I'll see you again later on this season, much later on in the season, and we'll do this again. Best of luck to you throughout the rest of the season. For everybody that wants more on this matchup, whether it be from the New Orleans Saints or Atlanta Falcons perspective, remember you can find Locked On Falcons and Locked On Saints on the Odyssey app, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube as well, every single Monday through Friday. Here is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, everybody, welcome into the first nailed it. Here we go. Try that again.